for June 9th, 2025. The time and place is advertised. If you'd please stand and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see any citizens here today, so no private citizens. We have government citizens here. So maybe we'll just pause for 1 minute, see if anybody comes in late. Some comments to share. Since we're moving so fast here. Luke, did you get in trouble today? I didn't know why you're sitting over there on that side by yourself.
Easier to work on things.
No one interrupts me.
All right. All right, well, I don't see any citizens, so we will move on to Roman number 4 for citizen comments, budget items. Item A, capital projects. B, capital funds. C, water, wastewater, sanitation, and D, utility rates. So we have our Public Works Director here with us today, Director Dustin Johnson. Director, welcome, and please introduce yourself for the record. Looks like we've got the microphones working today. Thank you.
Good evening, or afternoon, Mayor, City Council, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. Here to talk to you for an hour or two. There's a lot to cover. I'm gonna do my best to be succinct, but also this is a time for you. So I've got about 30 slides prepared. I've given you about 100 pages in the packet, given you some background on all of the issues that we're talking about specifically today. Our illustrious working title of capital projects, capital fund, water, wastewater, sanitation, utility rates kind of encapsulates everything in not a really cohesive title, but here we are. So as I said, I'm going to go through generally a lot of the utilities, some capital specifically regarding transportation. And we had to start somewhere, so a lot of what I did in preparation for getting the budget set that I'll present to you on capital, I had to load some form of a utility rate in there. I don't want to get stuck on that specific rate, but that's a starting point. And I'm looking for some feedback from the council as far as where those rates should or could be adjusted. So again, that is your role to play. My role is to try and give you as much information that's easily digestible, not only for you, but for the public. Because in July, we will come back to you at a regular meeting and have the utility rates for next fiscal year to be adopted. So I don't have to get all of your questions today. If you think of something later after I present, please feel free to email me and we can get this in front of you to better answer any questions you may have up until that public hearing, and then onward into the adoption of the budget. So with that, I'll start rolling. You may have seen this. This is kind of the overview of all of the funds. Highlighted are the ones that we're here to discuss today, specific to Public Works. The 4 in blue are enterprise funds. I'll get in a little bit more detail about enterprise funds, but those are specific to the utilities. So water, wastewater, stormwater, sanitation. The oddball, as it always is transportation. Transportation has its own capital fund, but it is not based off of a true utility. So when you leave your driveway in the morning, you don't pull the register and log the time that you're on the street. So capital transportation or transportation in general is always a hot potato. It doesn't matter if it's on the federal, county, or local level. It's a challenging issue, and we'll save that for last. So talking about enterprise funds. So what is an enterprise fund? This is probably one of the more common questions that we get. Enterprise funds specific to utilities, at least is what we're going to talk about today. They are an independent fund that is specific to each individual utility. And so they generate their own enterprise, and so they are self-sufficient. So water, the user fees that go towards you using your water goes specifically only to the water department. Same thing with wastewater, same thing with stormwater and sanitation. And common misconception is that, oh, they're just raising their water rates so they can improve their parks. We cannot spend water enterprise funds on anything other than the water enterprise. And so we'll get into some of the details of these individual utilities, because sometimes they have big capital projects and they're a little lean on reserves or the ability, and they need to up their utility rates. Or sometimes they're a little bit more financially solvent and they can absorb some of these unknown costs as the year goes on. And so that's something I really want to stress, is that enterprise funds, again, we're in the realm of government. It's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it. So if you're at home, you keep a savings account. And so if your car goes sideways and you need a new set of tires, you can probably borrow from your house fund or your Christmas fund to pay for a new set of tires. If something happens in the water utility, I can't borrow from any of these other enterprise funds. That's why they're self-sufficient. So that's why we carry reserve accounts for operations and capital in each individual utility, because they are, again, separate. I've recycled this slide. I think this might be year 4, maybe 5. How capital funds and rates are kind of generated. And so this is the life cycle of how we implement utilities. And so I'll just start at the top. Facility master plan. So we hire a firm, an engineering firm, comes in and looks at, independently looks at the utility systems. They evaluate our needs, our areas of strength, and kind of prioritize where we need to invest the ratepayer money and potential grants to get that system, projecting forward in the right direction. So we take that master plan and we roll it into a utility rate study. And so they basically take that capital improvement list, look at what it costs to operate it, and then compile kind of a general financial model projecting forward and saying, okay, so if you need to invest, you need a $5 million project, here's where you're going to need to generate those funds and how you're going to pay for it, assuming that you're not going to go out for a bond or you're not going to get a grant for anything. So that establishes the rates. And the goal of establishing rates are that you're carrying some reserves in operations and capital. So if there's a big spike in CPI or you have an emergency, you don't have to raise rates double digits. That's kind of the goal of establishing utility rates, is you don't want to have this whipsaw effect where one year it's 0, the next year it's 40%, the next year it's 2%. You want to kind of have an even keel so it's somewhat predictable. And then the third tier, moving forward, is implementation. So once you have established your needs, established how you're going to pay for it, then you basically implement it. And so each year you evaluate how far you're picking through your capital improvements, how your rates are going, are there any unknown surprises, maybe good surprises where you did get a grant, and adjust all of that moving forward. And so each, again, utility is in a different spot where one has just finished up a master plan, a facility master plan, where another one is behind the 8 ball and needs to look at adjusting rates. And so everybody's kind of in a different spot at different times. Again, another recycle that I'm hoping may not be here next year, but so where do these rates go to? And so this is kind of the pyramid of operations, are the base, the foundation of what you do. So the whole purpose of a water utility is to provide customers with water. So if you're not providing the customers with water, what are you actually there for? And so that's the most important thing, is that you got your operations, you're making water or treating wastewater, that you are doing what you're collecting the fees for to do. And so that is the absolute minimum that you have to do. The next thing is the debt service. People get angry when you don't pay your bills. So whether it's just, say electricity, labor, fuel, whatever it is, you're paying those bills, but there's also debt service. So there's two debts that the city currently has. It's through the state revolving fund, through the DEQ. One is for wastewater and one is for water service. And so we want to make sure we pay all of our debts. And so that is basically keeping the lights on. So those 2 tiers right there between debt service and operations just means we're meeting the minimum threshold. The top tier is capital improvements. And so that is, again, the analogy of the house that, okay, so I've paid my water bill, I've paid my electric bill, I've paid my mortgage, and I'm mowing the yard, everything is just operating, but I'm not saving for a new roof. I'm not saving to paint the house. I'm not saving for new windows. That's what happens when we start talking about going below the recommended thresholds for funding these enterprise funds, is it just gets basically taken out of the capital. So you fund less capital, and so you're just kind of delaying, future issues. So today's presentation is broken out into 6 components, and I'm going to go through each of these. As I said, transportation is last. It's kind of the oddball because there is no utility, and the first one's kind of an oddball because equity buy-ins are something that is attached to water and wastewater. But I'll go through each of these. There's typically a study, a history, a presentation that you've seen before. I'm gonna give you the history lesson of how we've got. I'm gonna talk about the capital as part of each of these utilities, and then hopefully have a conversation of where priorities are for capital and priorities are for the utility rates. So coming out the gate, equity buy-ins. These are complicated, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what they're for and who gets benefit from them. High level, the people who are already paying into the system get benefit of the equity buy-ins. So they are a mechanism for cost recovery. So if you've been a customer and you've been in Lewiston for 30 years, you have paid over the years your utility rates to pay for the replacements of the water plant, the wastewater plant, all of these things. And you've paid all the debt, you've paid all the service fees, you've paid all of that. And now if somebody comes in and say, okay, I just built a house and I get a brand new water plant, I got a new wastewater plant, and so you're coming on the tail end of that. And so this is a way for the existing customers to kind of share the debt that has been paid up to that date of the system. It builds in some fairness and equality, equity into the way the model is. It's based off of, and I did include in your packet, there was an equity buy-in study done in 2021, I believe. Yeah, October of 21. And there's a lot of case law, and there's a lot of math and finance and methodology that goes with all of this stuff. And I'm not gonna go into all of the details because it's quite complicated, but I always include this every time we get here for this conversation for utilities. So how do they work? So as I said, somebody comes in and wants to hook into the system. It's a one-time charge. It's based off of the system value, and it's specific to, ours is based off of 3 specific revenue accounts. One is water, one is wastewater treatment, and one is wastewater collection. So if you're in Lloyd, you're still in the city of Lewiston, you do not pay the water one. If you are in COSD and Lloyd, you don't pay the water one and the water collection one. You would only pay the water treatment because all the wastewater in Lewiston is treated at the wastewater treatment plant. So that's how that goes. If you're in all 3 of those, you're in City of Lewiston sewer and you're in City of Lewiston water, you would pay all 3 of those. What they came across, so back in 2021, what they came across was Lewiston, and again, I don't want to get too far down the line of how do we compare to everybody else. It's a good barometer to see. This graph that's from 2021 shows that Lewiston wasn't necessarily taking advantage of all of the opportunities they could to charge equity buy-ins. But it's all based off the value of the system and what the customer base is coming in at. And so at that time, 2021, water and wastewater, we were collecting $4,440 per hook-in, assuming that they hook in water, wastewater, and wastewater treatment. And so the study recommended over the course of the next 5 years to step up to $8,314. And so that's what, in the last 4 years, we've adopted this study and incrementally increased those fees. And so this is year 5. So at the end of this budget cycle, we're done with this study. We'll need to go back and evaluate and see where we're at. I did a kind of a cocktail napkin Google search to look at Post Falls, Pocatello, Coeur d'Alene, and Moscow, and all of those, because the concern of the council at the time was, well, we're gonna be some of the highest in the state by the time this thing's done in 2025. Well, everybody else raised it right along with us. And so we would be, if this last year is adopted and we were at 8,314, we're still behind. Again, not that that's a race or anything, but it's a barometer of how everybody else is valuing their systems. Post Falls is over $10,000, Pocatello's almost $10,000. Coeur d'Alene, and they're, some of them are called some cities call them capitalization fees, and some call them equity buy-in fees. It's the same thing. And then on top of that, like Post Falls and Nampa have impact fees on top of that. And then you also have impact fees for parks and police and fire. And so you're starting to see a lot of, these, whether it's Coeur d'Alene or Treasure Valley cities, really trying to ramp up to get development to pay for itself as best they can. So here's the chart from the phase-in strategy from 2021. You can see the 2025 numbers. That's where we're at currently. If we follow the plan for the final year, that's where we would be. This is the water one. And then this is the collection one for wastewater, and then a wastewater collection and then wastewater treatment. And so that all adds up to roughly $8,314 for a new hookup in the city of Lewiston if you have all of the services the city provides. So with that, I'll stop. I'm looking for feedback. If that's something you guys are in support of for one more year, we'll bring this back as part of an adopted fee and do the resolution and have it at that same time like we always do in July.
Councilors, let's just have a discussion and we'll just be courteous of each other, please. Thank you.
So Director, on these fees, the developer doesn't pay them up front. They wait till the person actually starts building?
That has been an ongoing conversation. I believe, do you guys know when they pay? Is it at hookup? At connection. So it is, yeah, at connection. Typically, they're baked into the cost of the lot. So yeah, whether the homeowner pays them up front or they're gonna pay the builder for them, the homeowner ends up paying for them.
So would this fee be applicable to those people that are connecting to the sewer right now, like the ones in the orchards?
Yes, yeah. One other tidbit on that is, since, and I only have water here, it's not a lot of revenue that are generated by this. One being that a lot of the growth out in that area, that would be Lloyd. So we don't see a lot of revenue in the water account. We see enough in the treatment portion, some in the collection side, but this is not making a huge difference in the way we construct our budgets right now. I mean, it is a way to offset some demand from the existing ratepayers, but looking at these numbers, yeah, I mean, $8,314 is a lot. I think the going rate in Idaho generally for some of these similar sized municipalities, even talking about Pocatello, ignoring Treasure Valley and Coeur d'Alene, you still, it's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 with once you pay in all your impact fees and hookup fees. So we're not out of the norm.
What kind of feedback are we getting from developers, new home builders, I guess would be the way to put it?
It's mixed. I will say most of anybody who's obviously, Post Falls is not shy in that they're struggling with growth. And so they keep ratcheting up impact fees and they keep, to try and make sure that with development you can't control. It's a floodgate. And so they are trying to control it as best they can. And so Post Falls, and it's expensive up there. And so if you've ever developed up there and you come to Lewiston, you recognize this is not a lot of money. If you're a local mom and pop, yeah, it feels like you're getting unfair treatment. But it's not out of the realm of, this is how most municipalities our size or larger deal with development, and trying to make sure those users who are already hooked into this system and have been paying into that system for sometimes decades are getting an equitable treatment as far as how these fees are levied.
If the development is a 100-unit apartment building, is that still just one hookup or is
No,
that many hookups?
It goes by meter size. So if you're, the bigger the, again, and this is the other one that's the eye-popping one, they're saying a 10-inch meter is 270,000. We don't have 10-inch meters. That is a massive amount of water. So that would be something that would be industrial, that we would probably have to modify the system around it just to accommodate that much water.
What do we have?
Residential is 3/4 inch. A lot of the bigger users, we get into single numbers. I think there's a couple 6-inch, or might be 1 8-inch water meter out there. There's not a lot. It's just that's so much water. Questions, comments, concerns?
Director, I want to ask a question because I need to understand a little bit more too. So I'm looking at the FCS study. Do you have a copy with
I
it?
do.
On page 3?
Yep.
So I'm just curious to know, when I look at this, it says equity volume fee calculation, and it talks about things like the net system replacement value for the current year, and then you divide it by the number of users the current system can support to arrive at your total equity volume per equivalent unit. So are there other actions that the city can take? We're not going to do that today, but are there other actions the city can take, that the council can take when they look at long-term planning that would impact these equity buy-in fees, other than just raising or lowering the fees?
Yeah, we looked at that, and I'm not quite sure I have an answer on the spot right now, but I know, because a lot of it's based off of that formula, and there's some nuances in what you do include in those costs. So I don't have an answer right now.
So in looking at this then, is your proposal to increase it from 19 to, this increase is showing here, 1954 to 3,500?
Yeah, to phase in this updated from 25 to 26. So this one is water. So to go from single family hookup fee of 32.18 to 35.34, and then the full rate structure there. And that's what we would.
Sorry, getting lost in the forms.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of accounting in here.
So we've been following this every
Yep,
year.
every year
Based on the study.
each year we have gone and followed this basically as it's been recommended.
Page 10. So Director, I'm going to go back to that chart again, on page 3. So that uses the net system replacement value for the current year. So presumably that was the current year in 2021,
Yep.
probably.
And that number has not been updated.
Yeah,
So these would be
in theory,
underestimated numbers.
Yeah, in theory, if that number was updated today, we could change the numbers in this table again, but we don't do this on an annual basis. I mean, that would be difficult to do, but at least we kind of know which direction we're headed, that this is based on science, or well, somebody smarter than me that knows this, but rather than just some numbers that we pick out of the air when we talk to the public, we don't just have this chart and say, well, I think we'll raise it to 35. I mean, there's been a lot of work done behind this, and then, as the director said, this is the last year. So when we look at another rate study, they're going to go back and they're going to reevaluate what the net system replacement value is for that current year. So that might be in 2026. And if it's lower, then you would expect the EBIs to go down. So, and we don't know that yet.
Yeah, we know that we've invested significantly into the system since this study was completed. So, these numbers would probably be underestimated if an analysis was done today.
Maybe it goes up.
Yeah, and I think what's important is, what was funny was when I started the city in 2020, and I think this was one of the first things that I pushed across as city engineer, and I was much smarter on this back then. I've slept a lot since then, but the methodology is based off of court case law, and so if you look in there, there was 2 significant lawsuits from 91 and 2015, and so that is the basis of the logic, and then you can follow through, as the mayor's called out, that specific exhibit number 1. It's all based off value within the system, and there's a little nuance in there of what you can count as replacement and everything else, but that's where it's not just pulled up out of thin air.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other feedback, I will move forward. I will bring the resolution forward at a regular meeting. You can vote at it then, unless you adamantly don't want me to bring it back. Okay, so we're gonna go from confusing to even more confusing. It gets easier as we go along, but water, as I talked in the beginning about enterprise funds, water is a challenging utility. There's just no way of getting around it. It's tight, and the more I look across not just the valley, but Idaho in general, water is a challenge. And our particular water system, it's diverse in that we have well water, we have river water, surface water that we treat at a treatment plant, but all of our water sources are down low and we pump it up the hill. And so that costs electricity, it's pipes, maintenance, it's a challenge. On top of that, we are in a period of time where there's a need for significant reinvestment in the system. And I'll get into the details of where we're at, but what's in front of you right now is our capital projection for next year. And that's a pretty weak list. That's $4 million, and 1.8 of that is a grant. That's a new upgrade at the water treatment plant, taking off well 4, which is down there. So it's a grant to the DEQ. We'll take their money. It's a great opportunity to invest in the plant and take that well offline, which is an underutilized asset. So the only other one that's worth calling out is number 3. So reservoirs. There's 2 steel tank reservoirs, one in North Lewiston, one up in South High. Those 2 are steel tank built in the 70s. They need to be recoated, and that's again, as we've talked about capital investment. 2 years ago, it was a couple $1 million, and every year it just kind of keeps adding up on costs. And so we're doing engineering analysis right now to try and determine, how we want to do it. We're only going to be able to do one at a time, and so we just keep throwing in $1 million a year and probably getting some progress done on it in the next year. But the biggest problem with those is that we're finding the way the water system is built right now. So like using North Lewiston as an example, that reservoir needs to be recoated. There's no stored water in North Lewiston beyond that reservoir. So if you take it down to recoat it, you gotta either find temporary water or figure out a workaround to keep water in North Lewiston, and kind of the same with the rest of our system. So that's the list of capital projects. And so I'm gonna take you back. This is from last year. And if you remember, we did FCS. I'll talk about FCS. FCS is the consultant that does a lot of our rate studies and analysis. And so this was a study, they updated the original study that was in your packet from 2021, I believe. No, that was 2020, August of 2020. So they updated this. And we included, we gave them all the updated rates up until last year and showed them our need for the intake. And so they put together this new rate structure and forecasted out how we could build this project of the intake. And if you notice, and I don't know if you remember this, it recommended a rate increase of 35% in 25 and another rate increase of 35% in 2026. And if you look at the chart, that was the revenue chart. So you see FY26, we were gonna build that water intake, and you can see we have a little bit funded, not a little bit, a lot funded through, this was leftovers from our SRF project that closed out, and a little bit of core money and some state ARPA money. So we had a kind of a mishmash of funding externally, but we still needed to make up a significant amount to make that project go. And so if you remember, we talked about how we were gonna do that. That would be a significant investment. We hit the pavement trying to get the federal delegation to step up for us to get us to pay for that. Ultimately, we decided not to pursue. We had enough money to build the stuff that was in the water, which is what we're doing right now. And so we will be in the water with our permits, get all the in-water work done, cap it, and move on. So we will have spent, I don't know, $8-10 million on a new intake that is not quite functioning yet until we find that balance. And so we told FCS, take that project out of your projection, and they came back and said, all right, so you're not gonna build the intake. So they recommended 10% increases for 3 years and then 5%. And that's what we ended up doing. We adopted that 10% across the board. So this one here is where we're at today. That's kind of the problem where water is right now. I can, off the top of my head, list, I mean, we talked about the steel tanks, the water intake, the water transmission line from the water treatment plant to High Reservoir. That one is the next one. And these are all multi-million-dollar projects that are not built into these rates. And so we continue to go out and look for grants. Grant funding is not looking great right now on the state and federal level. So we can, as you go back to that pyramid, we're operating, we're keeping it going, and we're paying our debts, but we're kind of slowly falling behind on these larger capital projects. And, going back, it's not like I can sit here and recommend that we raise rates 35% so we can pay for these massive projects, because that's not fair to the ratepayers. But, and that's where I'm coming to you to have this higher level conversation of what we're doing with water. It's gonna be a long time to pick through these larger projects while at the same time trying to be equitable with how we charge the ratepayers. We can come back to this. There's one more component I wanna hit on before we open it back up for conversation, is water meter charge. So somebody asked me, what do the contractors think about the equity buy-ins? What do the customers say about the water meter charge? And I think I want to change. By code, it's called the base fee, I think is what it's called. We call it water meter charge. The water meter charge is not, they did not create that charge to pay for the water meters. There's always been a base fee that just pays for, so water is based off of two things: the production of water and the transmission of water. And so that's what this water meter charge is. It is, if you sit at your house and you never turn your faucet on, you never turn your sprinklers on, you never take a shower, you never you still need to keep those pipes moving, or keep the pipes in service. And so that's what the base charge, the water meter charge, pays a little bit for the water meter, the pipes, the fire hydrants, all of that, all the way up to all the equipment that does. So when you do turn that faucet on, the water comes out. The consumption fee, now that is what goes towards the actual production of water and making it, and the electricity to pump it to your house. That's what that is. And so right now, as well, last year, about 44% of our total revenue in the water account is the base fee, or the water meter charge. The other 56% is the consumption. And so you're going back to this schedule, so we're at 25%. So right now, water is $3.59 per unit, which is 100 cubic feet of water. Nobody knows what that is, but that's how the industry measures water. And your base fee is $39. It's not low. It's not astronomically high. I looked across the state. Lloyd's got a very low meter fee. Moscow is right in line with us, so it's high. And so one thing that we've discussed with utility billing is, what if we froze that and let that sit for this year? Because that would allow the low consumers. So if you're fixed income, small lot, small water consumer, you can save water and still see, not as much as a charge, not as much as a hit as, because if you're only consuming 3 units of water a year, what's the difference between, or 3 units a month? That's what, just over $10, but your base fee is $39. And so if we were able to freeze that meter fee for a year or 2, or however we want to do that, that would spread that load to more of the higher consumers in the system rather than the lower consumers. There's no magic way to say this is more equitable than this, because the high consumers would say, well, that's not fair because I'm consuming water, I'm paying my base fee. It's just it's a matter of how do you want to spread this across as a utility? So here's our first point of conversation. We've heard a lot of rates. We've had a lot of conversations, everything from 0, where we just let it sit, to CPI, 5%. 5% is what we've built into the budget. So I talked earlier, we had to populate the budget somewhere to see where we're at. So we populated it at 5%. And what we did was we froze the meter rates and then built a 5% increase on the consumption fee or consumption rate right there. What that ends up doing is roughly putting you right at CPI. So, because it's 44% to 56%. So if council said, we're gonna go 10% on the consumption rate, your overall revenue next year would only be 5%. So as we've got it built into the budget, it's 5%, but the overall budget, okay. Looking at the end number is built on revenue from consumption and meter fees. If you lock the meter fees and you increase the consumption fee 10%, your final number is only increased by 5%. If you lock the meter fees, increase your total consumption by 5%, your overall increase is CPI, 2.5%.
You're losing you're losing what, 45, 46% if you
Yeah,
freeze.
yeah. One thing I did, Amy Gordon has helped me where we're at in the water department right now. So, as I said, we have reserves. And so we have capital reserves and we have operations reserves. And so capital is, when we need to spend it on something that's broken or unforecasted. The operations reserves is, when we are not, when the bills that we have to pay are not, we're spending more money than we're making. And with this 5%, we are burning $420,000 a year out of our operations reserve. So we can only sustain that for 2 more years. So this is an unsustainable market to keep, or unsustainable model to move forward. So when we built this budget with 5%, which is actually only CPI, overall revenue, you're still spending down reserves. You're still not, there's still opportunity for us to save money every year, which is what we try to do, be as economical as we can. And then the other component is water of all utilities is driven more by consumption than any other utility. Because, hot year, this year it seems to be a hot irrigation year, we may have better revenues, and so our numbers may be better.
So when you're looking at rates like that, and you haven't mentioned it in here, since our bond didn't pass and we still have to fix Main Street, is there any forethought in the rate increases to try every year, to try to get that accomplished? And it'll be for every one of these, right?
Yeah. And that goes into way back at capital. So that annual pipeline replacement, we typically don't put that out there for, we don't list them all. Streets we do, but for water, wastewater, we don't. And so that's where that would come from, is that pipeline replacement.
I mean, that's not very much.
No, it's not.
What's that, half a block or something?
Maybe a little bit more, depends on, a lot of that's just patch back and everything else. Yeah, so wastewater's annual pipeline replacement is $2 million. The other component on the Main Street was that since we got so many, it was wastewater, water, and stormwater all in one corridor, there was a lot of savings on there. And so you ended up seeing, the overall revenue coming from the utilities was only a quarter of that, and water was, part of it was paid through by ARPA. So it was a small carve out of this budget.
So to do that project, I don't want to all bog down on it, but can you actually do that small of portions at a time?
Not economically, no. That's up to, Main Street up to date, a lot of what you've seen is done through ARPA, and so it's only been water. It's been, you see the cuts and everything else, then the patchbacks are not great, and so that's what you get block by block, and then not a whole, you get chunky streets, and then you have to come back and fix the sewer. So yeah, it is not how you want to run it, and that's, again, going back to that original rate study, we tried to build into that rate these reserves, so when wastewater's doing Main Street's not a great example because there's so much going on, but if you got a project up a normal hill and it's on wastewater's top list and water's like, our water line's gonna be fine, we have the opportunity in reserves to kind of help that out, so we're not coming back and cutting up that street 10 times in 30 years. So we try and, that kind of helps us become more efficient on that, so we're not doing that block by block, then different utilities as we go.
So I guess another question is then for the inlet, water inlet, so the FY '26 plan is to wait for, try to get the Corps to fund it?
Yeah, at this point, well, I mean, we're under construction now, so our hands are pretty full, trying to close that, or get that, we don't go in the water for another month, in July. Yeah, we're in June now, so, close it out and then start having that conversation, but yeah, it's not built into this capital budget.
So the reserves, how much interest do we make off of those reserves?
That is not, what I do.
4.5%.
4.5%?
Is that investments or just bank account?
It's a combination of the state of Idaho investment pool and our investment tools at our bank. But they're comparably the same interest rate.
Is that fairly regulated and that's why we're stuck at a 4.2, 4.5%?
So a follow-on to that question then too is, get a lot of public comment that we have so much money in reserves, why don't we use it? So is there like a set amount of reserves for the water that we need to maintain?
Yeah, the study, and it's, I mean, I say it's a study, but it's generally industry standard that we have, it's in the packet, and I think I actually even tabbed it. They have recommended of levels of sanitation 60 to 90 days of operation, wastewater 60 to 90, and water 75 to 110 days.
So that's kind of the same with the cities.
Yep, yeah, it follows the same kind of, yeah, and again, because they're each individual accounts, instead of having one large bank account, we have 4 little ones, and they're not even little, and so, yeah, it's not the most efficient method, but that's the law. So water is the most complicated one. As we put together, this is a challenge because we start putting together capital needs and lists, and then we start looking at operations and where everything falls out. And I was modifying this spreadsheet or modifying this PowerPoint this morning and trying to get more feedback. I'm not sure where the best place to go is. I have been pushing hard, working with utility billing on trying to find a way to make those water meter rates more in line or help some of the lower consumers. But if we're burning through almost $500,000 in our reserves, I don't know that it's best to go to the 5%. Is it better to go to the 10% with the consumption rate and freeze water rate, or freeze the meter rates, or throw out the freezing the water meter rates and just go with the 5% across the board? I mean, we have a certain level of revenue that we need to keep this utility moving. How we dice it up, I guess that's up for you.
I feel like it's not in our best interest to freeze water meter rates, that everything should just be the 5 or 10%, just because we still need to replace our infrastructure. They didn't want a bond, so we have to do it somehow.
Well, at least the meter fees could be CPI, at least.
Any other comments, questions? I mean, this will be put into a rate, if I haven't already said it, we take the rate resolution, bring it to you, it's a public hearing, it's adopted, and then that solidifies our budget. And so then we can go to capital. And so this will be in front of you in a more formal setting, but we can continue that conversation. I can dig into more details. I do apologize. I mean, as you try and make things, I guess, more equitable and try and provide relief and find ways to make it work, you get deeper in numbers and you get more confusing. And my goal is to make it as digestible as you can. And unfortunately, some unique solutions get too complicated and people don't understand it, so.
Got a question. These assessments that we're getting, is there I guess, some light at the end of the tunnel at some point to the challenges that we found ourselves in at the moment?
Wastewater we'll get into right now. Water, the good news, yes, the good news is we have constructed many of the facilities, the water treatment plant. I mean, if you talked to us 5 years ago, we had a water treatment plant from 1924. We had many other facilities that were, 100 years plus. We have taken a huge leap forward, in constructing those facilities. And so, yeah, we are way better off. But what's unfortunate, much like when you buy an old house, what you know is what you know, and what you don't know is what you don't know. And so I think my predecessors and your predecessors have done a good job at evaluating the system. What's unfortunate is you still have some big dollar investments that you need to make, particularly in water. It's just, and I think we have had some gains in conversations with DEQ, and some of these projects may come, but if their funding dries up, our funding dries up, as far as grants. So I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, but not blowing sunshine here.
Gotcha, yeah.
So, Counselor, this is the cover page for the budget session. It's on your computer. It's a printout, but attached to that is a memo on the inside where Director Johnson, it's dated May 30th, 2025, and down on the bottom there, he's asking for some feedback. And so I think any and all feedback that you have today is going to help him in the city prioritize our capital projects, and then also some direction on utilities. So utility rates, he's done a good job of, I think, pointing out some suggested rate increases without going overboard. But as much feedback as we can give the director today would be very beneficial as we move through the budget process.
I would say, with as much as we have in front of us, the 10% makes sense to me. Nobody's gonna like it. I'm gonna have to pay it too.
Dustin, on the exhibit 6.3 proposed FY 2021 cost phase and water rates, it says there are a number of benefits that proposed rate structure will provide for the city. First, the rate structure will move more in line with the wastewater utility, differentiating between the different customer classes to recognize the difference in the cost of service for each class. But then it says on the other hand that might give difficulties for admin and administrative challenges.
Yeah, Councilor Klein caught that. So that was part of the original study in 2020 that was gonna break out the customer classification and try and make that more equitable. And that didn't pan out with our ability to administer that. So we do not have a customer class. We have meter size and then consumption rate. So yeah, there was some on that. The first couple pages, it was, Councilor Klein emailed me and I didn't know what she was talking about until I pulled up the study. So yeah, that's not, we don't do that.
So basically, the other exhibits here, what is the ones that actually we could entertain based on this study?
But it's basically the rate. We've locked meter fees, but then you have to make up that loss of revenue in your consumption rate. And then you pick your rate. If you were, the consideration is, I don't think the 35% is on the table based off of, we won't have the revenue for the intake, and so that would be causing undue burden to the customers for something that we would have to do twice. So I think the consideration is somewhere between CPI and 10%, and how you want to distribute that across the meter fees, or you can just do base 10%, base 5%, base CPI, or that same amount, but then without the meter fee, locking those in, or go CPI on meter fees and another rate for the consumption.
And where is where's kind of the line to keep us out of debt, so to speak, keep us in the black?
Yeah, I don't have that number. I mean, again, part of it is, that's why we have the reserves. I know 420 is a lot to burn through. But that's why we have those reserves, so you can go in the black and go in the red or go in a little bit. If you have, let's say we had a very wet year, our irrigation was very low and our revenue figures were very low. We would expect to not make as much as we typically do on a typical year. That would go up. We would absorb that in our reserves and then forecast that out just a little bit in our future rates. But I think generally, I think it's the 5 to 10%. 10% would keep us more sustained in that black area, that we wouldn't be burning that reserve.
Councilor Speckelmeyer, what were you thinking with the 10%? What were you referring to? Like freeze water fees and do 10%, or?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, freeze the water meter rate, 10.
okay.
Do we know, I mean, if we have, residential versus commercial versus public use hotel to motel, if they're paying less than their share, more than their share?
That's what this analysis was looking at, and then, we've had a couple newer, bigger hotels come in there. And that's one of the things that's in the capital is a new rate of analysis, rate study update, because this one is essentially 5 years old. And look at that. I have worked in a different state that had tiered water rates. We do not have tiered water rates. I don't know how it would work here, but that's something we could consider, where the lower customers pay a lower rate until you every time, if you got 3 tiers, Moscow has that, I know. Something to consider. So if you're a higher consumer, but then their commercial users don't pay the tiered, they just have a base rate, because like Blue Linen Laundry is a huge user of water, but they would not want a tiered water rate system because they're not in the business of conserving water. So tiered water systems are usually when you don't have enough water. So like Moscow and Pullman are having water issues. We have plenty of water. It's just a matter of getting it to the customers.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, especially for, people that are trying not to use a lot of water, or they're one person in the household and they're paying this high rate of water, and it's like, I barely even use my water.
Yep.
And there's no incentive for them to use less water if they're gonna pay the same as your neighbor who has 6 kids that pay baths every day, or water your lawn, either one.
That's exactly it, where if your meter fee is so high that 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, 20 units, it's at $3 a unit, there's no incentive to conserve. So you want that meter fee to where people can actually feel like they're conserving and saving money monthly. It is somewhat a little out of whack right now.
And what's the best way to be able to do that type of structure? Is that, like you said, where we'd have to come up with the analysis of?
Yeah, I mean, it's the financial needs that we have in the water department that we need to feed with those rates. So if we didn't have, some larger capital projects looming, and we didn't need to find a way to build that capital into the rate structure, we could find ways to make it more equitable or tiered or whatever term you want to use. But we're in a situation where we need the revenue, and so no matter how you slice it, they're gonna pay more than they probably want for water. That's just the facts of the situation right now.
Director, did you get what you needed on water rates?
I think I'm hearing 10% plus freeze meter fees, which is overall revenue of 5% increase.
That's gonna not have to be, that doesn't concern with the next year saying that's not sustainable.
That would get it pretty, I'll have to go work with finance to make sure, I can, when I do the public hearing, I'll let you know where that is at, but, that back in napkin, I think we're there for that. It doesn't address the capital, but it does address just the burning of the reserves.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that really quick, I mean, I would lean more toward CPI with the water fee and something between 5 and 10 for the water rate. But it depends on, I guess, what's getting recommended in here, which I'd need to read through this to see if, sticking with CPI makes sense, or if that's putting us over recommendations, because I understand things need to be balanced, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of the problem, I mean, obviously, if you work within CPI, that is just keeping up. That's not, and when you need to catch up, going CPI is not gonna get you there. But yeah, there's ways to move those numbers around.
Well, and I just mean, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we don't wanna have to spike up
Yeah.
that fee, some big amount, because that would probably cause some
Yeah.
challenges for people.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'll move forward. I think I've got enough here on water. I promise it will be, until we get to transportation, it's pretty smooth from here. Wastewater, so talking a little bit about how capital reserves work when you have a utility that's a little bit more in a stable financial state. You see a capital list that looks a little bit like this. And so I'm not gonna walk through all of these items. I have people here who know more about these if you have a specific question on any of these. But, call your attention to the annual pipeline replacement, so $2 million, as opposed to water, which was $500,000. So, wastewater's history, they also rebuilt the wastewater treatment plant, and now almost all of their emphasis, I shouldn't say the bulk of their emphasis is moving into pipeline replacement. So you're gonna start seeing pipeline replacement for I don't know how many years, but a large amount of pipeline replacement is gonna be in this year and next year and the year after that. And you'll see it's staged, I mean, we're building it as we speak. Normal Hill, and then there's pipe stored up at the cemetery right now. There's some more pipe stored up at the boat launch. That's what this is. And so, and kind of, I guess, an editorial comment, people talking about the Main Street project of, why do we always wait for everything to break and then fix it? And that's not what this is. Pipeline replacement, this is trenchless technology that we go through and slip line this stuff, and it's, particularly wastewater, it's low impact. I mean, it's not impacting the neighborhoods as much as it would be to dig up all these pipelines, so this is great. This is what maintaining your infrastructure looks like. Investing in these capital projects and replacing what's broken and fixing what needs to be replaced. One thing, and I don't see it on this one, included in the budget for capital, I think I skipped over it on water, but you'll see something called short-lived assets. And so short-lived assets is something that has an expected life expectancy of 5 years or less. And so typically it's something that you would expect that you need to replace. That is a large ticket item. So most of this would be pumps, computer communication stuff, valves maybe. And so those are built into the budget. And that's also a recommendation from the plan, because what was happening in these budgets where you expend, let's say, a big pump that's $100,000, well, that soaks you pretty quickly. And so we've created our own area of short-lived assets, as part of the capital budget, so that, that can contain all these things that They don't need to be replaced annually, but they will need to be replaced and they're expected to be replaced. And so that's built in these budgets. So the other thing to draw your attention to is the admin collections building. So at $5 million, that's the largest thing within this capital budget. That's something that's been a work in progress over the last couple of years. If you don't know how our operations in wastewater work, we have the treatment plant, and they handle basically the plant itself, anything coming in and treating it before it's discharged in the river. Then we have collections, and so that is a shop. So they handle all the pipeline stuff out in the streets. They're separate facilities. They're under the same department, but different crews. And so after the plant upgrade, we kind of kicked around this concept of why do we need two separate facilities? We've got actually plenty of space out there at the wastewater plant. And so looking at trying to consolidate the campus into one, it would get rid of one of the it's actually two buildings out in North Lewiston that we could get rid of that building, consolidate the crews, put them in one central area. We have a need for we need more storage for our Vector trucks and things like that. So we're working on consolidating that, and so that's a big part of this budget. We're working through that right now. So, any questions of what's on the capital?
I have I have one question, one comment. Director, I wonder if you could introduce our wastewater manager. I'm not going to assume all the council members know. So when you talk about buildings and combining, just put some faces to these projects out here.
Yeah. I think a few of you have gone out and met Nate Smith. Nate Smith is our wastewater manager, so he oversees both the treatment and the collections group. And if you ever want to go for a wastewater treatment plant tour, he is your guy.
Why don't we just do a quick
Yeah.
introduction of everybody?
Yeah.
These are all important projects. I don't want to assume everybody knows everyone out there. So.
So next to him is Joe Kaufman. So Joe Kaufman is an engineer on staff here. So Joe oversees wastewater and stormwater projects. He's also our negotiator on all things Army Corps of Engineers. And then Lauren's next to Nate. So Lauren is the one who keeps me in the right when you talk to me about financial questions. So she's doing all of the spreadsheets, budgets, purchasing, all of those things. So she's in this building next door to us. Behind her is Jeff Weimer. Jeff's our stormwater coordinator, manager. And then behind him is Alana Bailey. And she is also an engineer, and so she does our transportation and water. And so between Joe and her, they split the projects between the two of them. And over there is Luke Antonich, who's the city engineer. Did I miss anybody? All right. Claire's in the back. So we'll adopt her. So Claire works within Amy's office in finance. And so Claire's, the way things operate when we put together these budgets, we start with what we evaluate from an operations engineering perspective, what we need, and then we go through Lauren and Claire and Amy and set up these budgets. So that's generally how things work.
And then I'm going to ask, it looks like since you mailed this out on May something,
Yeah, there might be some edits.
May 30th, it looks like you added the rate study number 14.
Yep.
to
Yeah, the
wastewater.
rate study was only in, I think, water. It was not included in wastewater. So the rate study would be done collaboratively with all the utilities,
Oh, it wasn't on the chart. Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
So, on the water and the wastewater, you have that master plan update that is excessively expensive.
Yeah.
How long do those last? What are they, 5 years, 1 year?
A master plan. So this master plan is already being done. Is this the carryover from? Yeah. So this is the carryover from the last one. Yes. The first master plan I did was under $100,000, and now they're almost $500,000. They last between 5 and 10 years, more likely closer to the 5 side. 7 years. It depends. This one, since there's less treatment plant stuff and more collections, it may last longer on the higher end, but between 5 and 10 years.
So do you have to have these master plans for grants and such?
You have to have those for grants and in compliance with our DEQ.
Okay.
Yeah, they're required.
Will we be able to liquidate the other buildings if we build this admin building?
That is the plan, yeah. That was built into the structure, yeah,
What was your, I didn't hear the question.
the collection shop, we would liquidate it.
I had another one on your Vector truck. Didn't we just buy one? Wasn't that budgeted in this year?
Didn't we?
Yes, so the,
Nate, you better introduce yourself for the record, because we do record these.
I'm Nate Smith, wastewater utility manager. The Vector truck, getting the chassis took a long time, so they still don't have it yet. So we're not purchasing it this year, it'll end up being the next year, so we're not using it, the 600 from last year, so that's why it moved forward. So we're not buying another Vector, it's the one that we were
Okay.
purchasing last year for 600, is now being moved into 26.
Thank you. Also, you might just tell them briefly what you have. Do you have two buildings out there you're gonna liquidate, or just one, or?
We do, we have two buildings, one has 6 bays, it's across the street. And then we have another building on the other side of the street that has 2 bays and 4 offices. It'll go fast, the diesel place next door wants to buy it, so they've been asking nonstop, so, yeah.
Standing out
And we
front.
had planned on the admin building prior to this, we looked into it last year. And then we thought we might wanna stop on that if we're gonna actually move collections out there to save time and money, and this space would be better utilized for where we were building the old admin building, that space could be better utilized for something else in the future, so. Decided we would stop and change courses and do collections and admin for treatment at the same time.
And I think we're gonna add a little bit more to the new one, right? Because what used to be, I think, mostly male dominated, we're seeing other female in there too, and
Yeah.
now we have to make sure we
Yeah.
have, you
So
know.
that, we don't currently have facilities for any women, we have 2 currently in wastewater, so adding female locker rooms, things like that we have to
So
add.
that adds to the expense a little bit, because we have to kind of bring it up to the 90s at least, you know.
Yeah, working on it.
Yep.
Anything else?
All right, Dustin, you're up.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so going back to last year's update that we got from FCS, they recommended 3 years of 5% increases across the board, and then 4% after that. And that's what we did. So we are currently, this is the rate structure that we're in right now. So single residence, $52.09 a month. I don't know how my arrow got stuck in between there, but as I said earlier, wastewater has reserves, and it has several projects are out the door right now. So our reserves look bigger than they really are, because that money is encumbered on construction projects that are active and will continue to roll out. I don't know that it's necessary to go to the full 5% that was recommended from last year. Just not that the capital need isn't there, it's that we can't get these projects out fast enough, so we need to catch up on these projects. And so I believe we built this budget with CPI 2.5%, so this arrow should be down here. That's kind of where we're at. There's a lot less hand wringing and number crunching on the wastewater side. If we wanted to go full 5%, we could bulk up again and try and keep the capital projects rolling out. But it's just, we can only get so much out the door where we're at right now.
Is there, if we did make it 5%, is there a way to save that money and put it towards the Main Street pipe project?
I mean, we do, for these large capital projects, we do keep that money away. And so, and the Main Street was a great example for when we put that financial model together and we had all the pie charts. Wastewater had so much in capital that they were able to pay more than like water and stormwater, because they had it in reserve. So they didn't need to debt fund as much as everything else. And so that's why we got that capital or that bond number down from like 32 to 25, was because wastewater had money on hand. And so again, that money's not, a lot of it is encumbered on projects that are going out the door, but there is capital money that we can We just need to get it going faster, or get it out the door on these pipeline projects, and then the admin in the shop. So if there's no comments, I will roll that forward to you with basically CPI, with the rates, or in the public hearing in July.
So the 2.5?
About 2.5. Okay, moving on to our third enterprise fund, stormwater. So stormwater is the newest, and we talked about reserves, operation, and capital. We've been collecting stormwater for about 18 months now, and so those accounts aren't really necessarily fully there. I don't have a, balance as of today, but if you look at the capital requests, they're, design, study. A lot of this stuff is just putting ourselves in a position to start rolling out these projects once the funds are available. There are no grants currently. We were pretty close to a federal grant, but that program's since been shut down. Hopefully it'll come back here in the near future. So Jeff is here if you have any questions about any of these specific projects.
So a clarification on your design is so that, for instance, the 4th Street and 12th Avenue, is it because there's not one there and you're gonna design a new one, or is to replace what is there, or what's the design gonna do?
Jeff, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
Jeff Weimer, Stormwater Coordinator. This would be a design, it's right next to Bangle Field. It's the pipes right now, they're undersized, they are collapsing, they need updated. So we're looking at a design to either reroute around Bangle Field or replace it through the old Bangle Field there. So we need to make sure that we get the proper sizing of the piping for that.
So then, since you're here, what's the South Nez versus grade pond design?
The pond design, that would be the inlet of the line that runs down underneath the mall and then runs down 20th and kind of meanders through pipes and back in and out. But this design would help reroute that around the mall and back into our system.
Now, does that include, is that part of that, is that creek that goes through there?
Yeah, that's the very inlet of that,
Okay.
the headwaters of that spring.
Because I think during the big flood, the 100-year flood, that really caused problems through there.
Flooded somebody's basement down there.
Yep.
Yeah, there were several places that were impacted through that area. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving forward, so you may recognize this little chart that was put together when the city adopted the stormwater utility. And so going back again to the pyramid of, we needed to make sure that we've had 100% coverage of operations and permit compliance. And then what we could cut back on was the capital. And so the council had a couple different options to consider. And it was basically paying quarter capital, half the capital, 2/3 of the capital, or full capital. And these year dates were basically how fast you were gonna turn over those projects. So the goal is always to have, a 5-year turnover, 5-year capital project list. And so the council at the time decided to make, these, going back into the 2 service areas, these were the rates that the city adopted. So that's essentially half capital, and that's where we've been ever since. There's not been, last year at this time, since we were only 6 months in, we didn't even consider, we needed to kind of figure out how the system was gonna get off the ground. Here we are. This budget that is in front of you does not include any increase. Not because I'm not advocating one way or the other, it's just, we didn't consider it. And so we could go back, if the council so wished, we could, whatever rate you wanted to consider it, we could go back and build that budget, and that just means that's going more into, well, it would probably go back into operations reserves, capital reserves to build that up for those projects that we'd be currently designing. Because what would happen, generally, we would complete these designs and studies, and then we would have to take a couple more years to build up the reserves or the money to construct them. So, that's your cue.
And I think from what I remember from it was what the stopping point of was that we didn't know how much it was gonna cost. And still, I guess we don't, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're still, I know we have, the revenue figures have come in each, I don't wanna say month, they've gotten more stable, but, we are now getting more firmly, they're more predictable. I mean, because there was a lot of appeals and protests and all of that stuff in the beginning, and legitimately, there were some properties that were mischarged and cleaned all of that up. And so I think we're much more in a stable state now of administering the program. Jeff is now, here and helping us administer the program, and there's a whole compliance component and then a capital and construction with it too.
What you're just, basically what we're saying is, we'll just stay with the half capital that,
If that's the desire of the council.
that'd be status quo.
That'd be status quo. That's where we're at, that's where we've been. Right now, we're still in the early stages. Even if we had capital in the reserves, we don't quite have the projects to build, but that will be in this budget cycle, we will start having those projects to build. So, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but you also don't want to put yourself behind the curve here.
Because a full capital, we're saying might not be beneficial because we're not really sure where we are as far as funds and then having the projects to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give Jeff and the streets department credit. I think the goal of what we were trying to do starting this utility was, making sure that people saw, they pay utilities, stormwater utility, what are they getting for it? And so, there's been a half dozen projects that they've gone out, and now that they have a dedicated funding source going out there, and those are one-offs, something that has historically flooded, trying to address those areas, and that's more of an operational thing, but that's something that we kind of strive for to make sure that people see value in what they're paying for. The bigger issue is just like the stuff that goes underneath the mall. That is, a lot of those long, deep pipes, collecting big basins, that's a big project. And, it would take several years to accumulate enough capital to get that project off the ground.
So compliance-wise, I assume there's some federal and state compliance that we're trying to meet. Where do we stand at this point?
I think we're, we coordinate with the DEQ, and we have our annual report went in just a month or two ago. I guess I'll let Jeff speak to the compliance component because that's a lot of what he does.
Our annual reports went in around the end of November, and we just renewed our NPDES or our MS4 permit application just about 2 months ago. So that's been applied or sent in, and then they accepted that. Now we'll have a new permit that'll be issued come the end of October. Or the end of September, sorry about that. And they'll give us all of our new regulations at that time. hopefully it stays the same. But
So are there projects that we have a deadline that you have to have X completed by X date or I'm trying to understand kind of how this works.
So mainly our permit requirements are, we're trying to ensure that in order to discharge to the rivers, that we have to ensure that we're cleaning the water better than as of doing nothing. So with the enhanced sweeping that we have going on, that removes a lot more pollutants from the roadways. Vector maintenance, cleaning out of all the catch basins and all the lines, that's also removing pollutants. Then we have public education and outreach that helps educate the public on how to reduce pollution. And then also contractors and just like Public Works Day, we had education and outreach there to teach the school age kids also.
I guess maybe I should ask the question different. Are there areas where in the city we're not addressing storm water like we should? We're not funneling it through pipes and that's a concern to federal or state and we need to get that completed soon. I'm just trying to understand if we need to invest more in capital or if where we're at is reasonable for the stage we're at with stormwater.
We're really trying to focus on your discharges going into Lindsay Creek or Tammany Creek to reduce the pollutants there because they're listed streams. And that is part of our requirements. There's not necessarily a date on there, but a lot of our stormwater manual that we have out now and that's been adopted, that addresses a lot more infiltration instead of just sending water to the watersheds. So once it goes into the infiltration basins, then it cleans the water instead of just running straight pipes to the streams.
Okay.
So any new development, particularly up the top of the hill, you'll see the big retention ponds and stuff. The water's funneled in there. There really isn't an outflow to take it down to the river. You kind of deal with it on site.
So what do we do?
It dries up.
We just
Live in the
let it
desert.
sink into the,
Yeah.
okay, I got you.
Let it infiltrate in, then also it recharges your aquifers. Tables.
So we're not meeting 100% compliance, but we're heading there.
We're really close.
We're really close.
Yeah. I mean, we have a couple of tweaks to ordinances and that's about it.
Okay. Unless they change regulations. Currently at our
Yeah.
current regulations, we are almost there.
I just say, congrats to the city staff because getting the NPDES certificate finally, I don't know how long it took. It was several years from the time we filed till the time we got it. So good step in the right direction and buys us a little time too.
Jeff, could you just touch on the education component briefly, because that is part of our permit. Working with developers, as I understand it, if they're gonna disturb more than an acre of ground, and we have a lot of that going on right now, that they have an obligation too.
Yes, so that is part of, we educate the contractors, we require them to have a permit through the DEQ currently. If they disturb an acre or more, and it has to discharge to the MS4 or the waters of the state. So that's, you'll see some of these that are under the permits, some of them aren't, and the ones that are not, they do not discharge water to the waters of the US or our MS4.
Yeah, I just think it's important for all of us to understand that the stormwater program isn't about just stormwater. I mean, you've got a lot of other things happening, where you've got education and compliance, the street sweeping you mentioned, that all comes under that permit, so it's not just a matter of building pipes and moving stormwater around, we've got other obligations that keep us busy.
So far, the state of Idaho, they haven't required water quality component yet, so that the pretreatments, they don't have to meet a certain standard, or the soils don't have to meet a certain standard to actually qualify for infiltration.
What role is the Corps currently playing in any of this?
The Corps,
Since a lot of our water does end up in the retention ponds along the levee.
we utilize their ponds as settling in pretreatment before that gets pumped out into the river. Because that's where the majority of our stormwater ends up, is at those levee ponds. And if it wasn't for the levee ponds, then, and it went directly to the river, then we'd most likely have to put pretreatment
Oh, yeah, we'd be in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm hearing no rate adjustment, but I would say expect something for the next year, because we will have better numbers and history and some designs on the shelf for some capital projects. Sanitation, so this one is, again, a little bit unique in that most of what we operate within this utility is contracted out. So SDI is our hauler and collector, and we dispose of our waste at the Soap County landfill. And then we have our composter, Clearwater, who does the composting, yard waste for us. So 3 different contractors and 3 different contracts with those contractors. We got an update from SDI last week. We still do have a facility, that's the transfer station up there. That's why our capital list is somewhat small in comparison to the other utilities. Transfer station, so going back, in this year's budget is the road into the facility coming down off of Wild Dove Way. So that one is built into this year's budget. And then for next year's budget, we need to upgrade the transfer station floor. I don't think the design's $150,000, but I would like to be able to springboard into the construction of it, and I'll get the updated design, I'll get the design costs, and I'll get the updated estimate. So more than likely, we'll probably have the actual construction of the floor in FY '27 and design and getting everything set for '26. I think I've talked to you a little bit in the past about the floor, but it's the life of the facility.
I was wondering, does Nez Perce County contribute to the cost of maintaining the transfer station?
Yeah, they pay an agreed amount. And we're revisiting that right now, actually, and updating that contract or agreement.
So on that floor, I was just out there today, and what is the surfaces? It looked fine to me.
Yeah, so it's concrete, and a lot of times, and I wasn't here when they built that, but a lot of times what you put in there is metal shavings in it, so it'll wear better against the pusher, the loader. And I've been out there on the floor and it does look pretty good, but once you have exposed aggregate, that will start popping out once you get the aggregate exposing, and then once you get a hole, even if it's just a small little pock mark, that's basically the end of the floor, because you're gonna start digging. You want that as smooth as you can, and then with that it's not really, it's the metal shavings, you can, I was gonna say, it's concrete, and so, engineers will ruin a birthday party. They can give you all kinds of additives, they can cure it in an hour, and you can put, metal and all kinds of different things into it that would, make it last longer, but of course, the cost just skyrockets. So we've looked at it, the building was built in the 90s, correct? So it's been loved. So I don't want to put the Taj Mahal floor in there for a building that's, it's a pole barn, there's nothing fancy about it, but I also don't want to put something in there that we're going to be ripping out and a year or two. Because we will have to shut down the facility for a certain amount of time and trying to find that right time period to do it. That's all worked up in the plan. Real quick, last week, I think it was last week, you got the update from SDI. We're working with our attorneys and their folks to put together an amendment to that agreement that will come formally to you here sometime this summer for your consideration, and we'll have that vetted out further from what we talked about last week. But what's, again, talking about these utilities and enterprise funds, by having some of these operational reserves and capital reserves, you're able to absorb some of these, if it's an accident, a failure within the facility, or a market adjustment that happens, which what we're experiencing, the utility is able to absorb it, because SDI is only a portion. It's a big portion, but it's only a portion of what goes into your sanitation rates. And so, working with finance, we're able to see that the city doesn't have to raise rates 18.5% to carry forward what SDI needs, if the council so decides to accept that amendment. And so we are able to gradually increase rates by taking that hit. We have reserves right now. We've been trying to spend those down, and so we can absorb that hit. And basically the budget that we've got in front of you that we've built is a 5% rate increase. And a reminder to you that next year, Soap County's contract is up, so we'll renegotiate with them a tipping fee, and that was done in 2015. It's a 10-year contract, and so think about what things were like in 2015 compared to what we experienced. So I'd expect probably not an 18.5%, but a significant increase on that. But where we're sitting today, I'm thinking the city can probably just project 5% or somewhere in that neighborhood, 4 to 6 or whatever it is. But we'll keep a close eye on it and reevaluate it each year annually and see where we're at, and just try and again keep these rate increases at a moderate rate and somewhere in line with CPI, so people are can expect but not be shocked when they see some of these changes.
You say year ago or 2 years ago that we have to keep the reserves because we have to help pay to open and close the pits?
You're talking about the landfill?
Yeah.
No, they keep their own. So when you pay your tipping fee, there's a portion that goes directly into a closure and a post-closure fund. So they manage all that, but that's what part of our tipping fee goes to.
If we were to eliminate recycling, would that help offset our potential rate increase?
Yeah, I'd have to go diving in there, but yes, there is a
Look at the end of that a
portion.
little bit, since it seems like it's, like Clarkson doesn't do it.
Yeah,
It's nice because I can have double garbage, realistically, but if it's really worth that rate increase to the customers, I'm not sure.
yeah, Councilor Kleberg is probably the only person that remembers it. There was a survey done, do you remember? It was like 2019, 2018.
Probably about that, yeah.
That went out to the customers, and this was when, might have been, I think it was before COVID, there was a surge. China stopped accepting our recyclables, and it really shocked the market. And the city Lewiston created a recycling surcharge. And there was a survey out that went out to all the customers, and they said at that point, they wanted to subsidize to keep recycling. We've talked about, it's not in the budget, but we've talked about updating that. And I will say, we've been a little busy with some of these other projects, but I think we do deserve another conversation with the council to talk about priorities when it comes to recycling. We did 2 years ago, because there was that recycling surcharge when the commodity values dropped. And so the city created this recycling surcharge, and I can't remember what it was. And then 2 years ago, we got rid of that and didn't touch rates. And then that helped us absorb that. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. We haven't updated that.
Would it be possible to do like a surcharge for those people that wanted to keep it and then eliminate, like if you could opt out of recycling for people that didn't?
I'd have to go back and look at that, because a lot of that, I'd have to look at that. Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
don't know if you can take part of the,
You're just like, okay, if you want recycling, it's $10 a month.
Yeah,
And then if you
yeah.
don't, then it's not added to your bill or something, you know, something along those lines to be able to offset the costs.
Yeah.
the, part of the issue at the time was that the market had pretty much disappeared for recycled, I don't wanna say merchandise, but recycled goods or whatever. And, so there was no market. And now there's a resurgence, and it has been going on for some time. You got Malaysia and Vietnam, both those countries are building or have built gigantic recycling facilities. You know, China didn't want our garbage anymore. That was up to them, so. I don't know what effect it's had on Sunshine, if we're gonna be seeing some of the benefits of that or not, but I think at the time it was decided that we'd already established a pattern of, behavior for having the blue cans, educating people about what can and can't go in to the blue cans. The one big thing that drives me nuts when I drive down the street on Wednesday up in my neighborhood is seeing a pizza box in the recycling bin. And pizza boxes are hideous with oil. It's not good recycling material. It goes in your garbage can. So I always want to just get out a note and stick it on there when I'm driving by. No, if we keep the, supply chain rather clean, the market will return. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just, once you've established that, the pattern of having it, I think it's been beneficial, but
Well, if you
maybe for
reduce,
different.
if you reduce recycling, it's just gonna go in the trash.
That's what I was gonna say, I
Correct.
was a little
So,
worried.
the cost is just gonna move over here.
Correct.
Well, then we have to pay the extra cost, and then eventually we'll see it and then have to have the consumer pay the extra costs. Cause now they're not separating it,
Then I won't
right?
care where I put my pizza box.
Isn't it the same amount if it all goes to the garbage anyway?
Yeah, tipping fees,
Yeah, it does.
$48 a ton. There's a component in our contract with Sunshine that, and I don't know that we've ever used it, I mean, we haven't used it in many years. We've had to use it if the baler's broke, but if the commodity value sinks to a certain dollar amount, and it's basically we're not getting any money back on the recycling, we can divert it into the landfill. That's not, the environmentally friendly thing that people, when you separate it and they do it, and so that's why we don't do it. But if for whatever reason those commodity values dropped again like that, we do have that option in our contract to divert them.
Is the 5% because we expect these various CPI type changes from our contractors?
Yeah, just to keep on that even, the spike of SDI and the Soden County and everything is gonna go like that if we can kind of keep it even direction upwards. And sanitation is a tough one because it's so heavily contracted. And I will tell you, for whatever reason, COVID changed the world for many ways, but people throw away things so much. Our surge of revenue has not dropped at all. And so, yeah, we do have healthy reserves, and so we have the ability to absorb that right now.
If we went to a model where households could elect not to do recycling, it'd be very expensive for the contractor because they don't know how many trucks to buy, how many people to hire, because they don't know how much recyclables there's gonna be to collect. So that would be part of the problem of making that elective. What we have today is like a global service, if you will. You get your yard waste, you get your recycling, you get your garbage, and what you pay is compulsory. You don't have a choice. You can pick a 32, 64, 96 gallon cart. That's the only choice you get. But otherwise, it's a consolidated system. Now, we used to have these satellite collection facilities for recyclables. So if we were to ever get rid of recycling and not have curbside recycling, then those folks that want to recycle could haul it to a satellite facility, like at Rose Hours or other places, and they could continue to recycle. However, the folks then that maybe don't recycle, that put their pizza box in there, or maybe a big box because they just got presents, and they don't crush them down, they just throw it in the big blue bin, and that's all they recycle. When it comes time to pick up their garbage, they're gonna have to order a larger cart, and they're gonna pay more because they don't have that extra place to dump stuff. So it's not simple necessarily, but
Yeah, there was a big part of the conversation of discontinuing recycling, and once you cancel it, it is an expensive, you gotta collect all the totes and everything, but very expensive to start it back up, because as the mayor already said, you know, the routes are mapped out, the totes are there, the drivers, the trucks, everything is there. If it's not penciling, then you just end that service, but it's not like we can stop it in this month and pick it up the next month. There's a lot of work to get it back out, if that's the desire of the public then. Okay, so any other questions on sanitation? Last slide. Transportation. So as I said, this one's the weird one. There is no utility for transportation. There is a lot of funding sources across the board for all of these things. The city is very aggressive in the grants that we pursue, and I think we've had a pretty successful run in the last year or two. I don't know, I'll guess I'll go through this pretty quickly. So annual street preservation, that's the chip seals that you see annually. We keep trying to push this to get this number north of 1.5 million, maybe even closer to 2. That, as I've said, maintain the roads that you've got and then reconstruct the roads that are gone. And so the more you invest in this means the fewer streets that you're gonna have to reconstruct. Snake River Avenue that one is through, I guess, grant funding and part of our direct federal allocation. That project's been in the queue for many, many, many years, and it will finally be constructed. Maybe start a little bit this year, but most of it will be constructed next calendar year. These next couple are components to the signals and traffic lights that are antiquated that we're trying to fix or update. Brighton Avenue, I think I gave you the update that we did. We were successful in a safety grant. Unfortunately, it's just a dollar amount. It's $2 million, where the whole, I think it's in our best interest to mill and overlay the entire, from the top of the canyon to the bottom, instead of just doing half. So we're short $2 million of a $4 million job, so that one will be built into arterial reconstruction more than likely. And then these next couple are all grants that we've acquired. Main Street's in here, and I think we did talk about, the need for Main Street has not gone away, even though the grant or the bond did not pass. This is more or less a placeholder. That is not the final design cost. I think it's significantly, it's $2.5 million estimated for the full project, maybe more than that, slightly. We're continuing on. There's a survey out there for the public. Want to get the feedback on what they liked and what they didn't like about that project. If there's a way that we could parse it out and make it more acceptable to 66.7% of the public. And we're also having some conversations with ITD on roundabouts and their participation, or what it would look like to get their blessing on that project. So that Main Street's, it's not going away. I think we've, during that campaign, or whatever you want to call it, I got a lot of feedback, and I think the opportunity is there for multiple infrastructure improvements to move forward. Number 9, sidewalk master plan. So I think every year we do the CIP, and I think it's Councilor Forsman always points out, there's two sidewalk projects called out, and they're like $8-10 million. Nobody's ever gone through and done an evaluation of those sidewalks. And so in the sidewalk master plan that we've adopted, it's on our website. It's not great. I think it's almost 30 years old now. I would like to do it would be an amendment to the transportation plan, which would just pull out those sidewalk projects and work with our ADA transition plan and kind of pull out areas where we would be more competitive on some of these grants, and do that. The ABCs on the bottom are projects they could be moved up into the funding. Well, Southway Bridge, this is a gap year, so that project is coming. Southway Bridge this year we're just rolling over that analysis that was done in this current budget, and then probably doing a full design and construction in FY '27. But Southway Bridge will progress in '26, even though we don't really need to dedicate any funds to it. Thane Preston 10th Warner corridor design, so that goes back to that Thane corridor study. There were some recommendations. So that Thane corridor study was a study. I'd like to take that study and move that forward into some sort of design, more of a corridor. So Thane and Preston to help take off some of that load. You need to do Thane and Preston before you 10th and Warner. And I think there was some openness to the Thane Preston component, and I want to have a bigger conversation on what improvements to Thane would look like and what's acceptable to the council and the public on that. And so that one's not funded in there, but that's a top tier project right now. And then finally, Wild Dove Way cul-de-sac, so that's a project that was in partnership with the port. Northwest Forest Line came in there. That was part of the overall subdivision up there. This little cul-de-sac didn't get picked up. Been working with the port, been working with the mayor, been working with Northwest Forest Line. It needs to be done. It's gonna go through Public Works and Engineering to get it completed. My preference would be not to fund it through our other capital, transportation capital. Based off the original agreements, it seems like it probably actually should go back into the sanitation component, because that's when the transfer station went up there. But I just wanted to let you be aware that that project needs to be funded this year, because I told Northwest Forest Line we would have it resolved by the spring. So we need to get that funded and moved forward.
In our packet, you have number 8 and B
Yep.
swapped.
Yep.
So is this
Yep.
what we're looking for?
Yep.
Looking at?
That one was updated. So yes, this is Main Street and Thane and Preston got swapped out, but you can swap them back if you want.
So my question about that same thing was, I think when we went through that study, that corridor, that 10th and Thane, all that was a big concern for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, before spending money on a design, especially if it was $500,000 that was on our packet we have, maybe figure out what everyone's agreed to that we want to move forward on before looking at a study that costs that much.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, I mean, that's what that Thane corridor study did. I mean, we went building to building and asked everybody what they
I
wanted.
don't think the council liked it.
That's exactly the problem. So, we've invested quite a bit into that study, and so, I come to you of, what do you wanna do? Cause we did spend a lot of time and to try and find out what the public did, and we thought we had that, and then the council wasn't supportive of it. Because, yeah, I mean, the 10th and Warner functions fine today, but any traffic modeling, forecasting out, it starts to break real soon. And as I said, I think the contractor, the consultant and I did, that corridor needs some other connections across it to take the relief off some of the, 10th particularly. Preston is a good opportunity to do that. But it's gonna be a stage. I think what that was looking at is kind of working up start small and work your way up, because, 10th and Warner is not really, it's not ideal for a roundabout. The city doesn't own the property. The channelization doesn't function well for some folks that may want to go to the high school. That's a bigger issue, but if we can start taking relief, picking away at the sides.
I just think for me, it's something that needs to be brought forward again, and kind of see which one we want to move forward with and get a consensus. I mean, spending money on it.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, in our conversations since this packet went out was Main Street's there.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more of a I don't want to say controversial, because I think everybody agrees it needs to be addressed, but the solution isn't quite vetted out. And maybe when we get through budget this fall, we can bring it back and have a more thorough analysis of what you would be supportive and maybe what the public would be supportive.
Also, another one on here, we have a lot of that arterial, it's an improvement fund.
Yeah.
But last year, we put, what, $2.3 million into it or something like that, correct?
Yeah.
So the balance of it, I don't know, is it right around there, $3 million? I don't know.
No, I think you talked it.
2 years ago, you put 1.6 million into it. 3 or 4 years prior to that, there was 700,000 put into it, but yeah, 2.3.
That's about the balance now is what?
Yeah, I mean, we're also paying our stormwater fees out of that, so.
So I guess my concern here is that was also one of the main funds that was gonna support the bond, you know?
Yeah.
And my thought was that moving forward, that would help us if we had to do the road work. You know, each year if we did one block of the water sewer, wastewater, you know, that would help support, you know, moving forward to fix the roads as the project moves on. Unless we're gonna put another good big chunk in there, which I haven't seen that dollar number, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that arterial I mean, as long as we keep funding it, you know, as we have, and that's where we're at with the budget. Yeah, we either build it up to where we can cash flow a project like Main Street or Thane, or the public accepts what we're telling them and they vote for a bond. The bond would lock us into those prices, and then we would, I mean, for the Main Street project, it would be just short of $1 million a year for that debt service. So,
I would just be afraid that, you know, it'd turn into a fund, kinda like the fire department that got changed, you know, and we all voted on them, but it got changed, you know, and now it's being used for different things, and it's just kinda hard to keep track of it. And I see this listed as using it to fund a lot of things, you know, the bridge and designs. That's my concern.
this one you don't have to change any utility rates because there's no utility. So if there's any more feedback on specific projects or one you don't see on here.
So for the annual street preservation, is there like a maximum estimated cost that we could actually handle to be able, like, as far as like labor and what we could actually use
Unfortunately,
for arterial?
Unfortunately,
preservation?
probably not. What we're finding right now, so going back a couple years ago, it was a lot more straightforward and simple, at least my perception is that we're doing more what we call quality patching. So you used to just go mill and overlay, or just do a seal coat or a chip seal and put it down and you move on. And that was pretty predictable, but nobody wants to chip seal a rotten road. And so now we're going out there on some of these roads, you know, and I've talked about some of these roads in the orchards that were not built on adequate subbase. And so we're trying to build up where the base has completely failed. And so what we're getting for dollars per mile or whatever you want to say is far greater. And so we're getting less done with more, costing more money to get less miles, I guess is what I would say. So, but you don't want to invest chip seal on a road that you're just going to reconstruct. And so again, we're having that conversation on, say, Brighton Phase 2, where that road is not long for this world. You know, it's particularly everything east of 7th. It's wearing down. And so does it make sense to put a chip seal on that? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, at some points we have to do it because there's a giant hole there, but.
Director Gordon, would you be willing to take the stand here and maybe just clarify, for me at least, Councilor Spickelmeyer's concerns with the Transportation Capital Fund? I want to make sure that we're not leaving here with the wrong information.
The specific concern on how much is being dedicated to it each year?
Yeah, how much we're spending out of it and where we're going to get money in the future and all that.
The current year and the prior year, since council's dedicated those additional revenues to capital transportation, we really haven't utilized them at all. Time and energy has been going into preparing for the Main Street project and moving forward with a bond, so we haven't done a lot of construction out of that account, so we have been building up reserves. We did fund the design contract with Welch and Comer out of that fund, but other than that, there's been pretty minimal construction compared to what could be constructed in a year. We've had some smaller projects that had some grant assistance, but we've been really building up those reserves the last 2 years.
And I think Councilor Picklemeyer had a concern, if I heard this right, about the street preservation and other projects coming out of there. Is that what you had said?
No, from what, on this listing, you know, just looking at things like the Southway Bridge, I mean, why, you know, it's, to me, if you're gonna focus on it, you know, stick to it. And even, you know, the thing corridor, to me, you need to keep it built up so when we do the Main Street, we have the money. You know, it's not a huge property tax increase just to finish the roads on Main Street. I mean, because once you start picking away at it, it's gonna be gone. It's kind of like our unassigned building fund, you know, we're getting things done with it, but there's definitely not the money there that there was 2 years ago.
Well, it's definitely new territory in regards to capital transportation, because 5 years ago, they got so much less on property taxes each year that the property taxes they were getting were really just little bits being set aside for future projects, but it was more there so that they could marry it with grant funding. So we were really reliant on grants to be able to move forward with a project. Now we do have money going in there, building up a little nest egg that we could fuel into these bigger projects. So yeah, but where you move forward with that money lies in your hands.
Thank you, Director.
That's all I got.
Jamie did
Good timing.
No, yeah, I mean, it is almost 5 o'clock. We can go back and we can talk about any component. We can have any questions. I think I got, as far as utility rates, I got the information feedback I want. If there's any adjustments or, I mean, we talked about concerns about the transportation component. I did, as Councilor Klein picked up, this is a work in progress as we have these conversations with the mayor and staff and learn more things that should be included or modified. So, you know, it's funny, as I was working through this, I was frantically, we got to add this and we got to add this. And it feels funny because it's June and we're not adopting this budget for another couple months. But, you know, everything gets really condensed this time of year. And so, I mean, from my perspective, please feel free, shoot me an email, give me a call, stop by, help me understand your perspective, or maybe I can, if you have questions that you don't understand any aspect, because it is, as I said, I try and make it, or we collectively as the group, we try and make it as understandable as you can, but there's never gonna be enough money to do all these projects that we want, and so we need to be creative in how we approach them. And sometimes when you get too creative, you get too cute, and you get, you know, it gets way too confusing, and it doesn't help anybody, so.
One quick question. So back on the water inlet, so is there any word or, you know, have we heard anything from the Corps on that? I know the mayor, you were working on it for a while, but nothing?
So Counselor, the short answer is no. The last conversation I had on funding was with Senator Crapo's office. They were willing to request more 595 funding, which is grant funding from the Corps of Engineers, but it was not for the city of Lewiston, it was just for the Corps of Engineers overall. And so if they were successful in getting that money, the chances of it coming to Lewiston, getting past the people in Portland, are probably slim. I think the salmon have a better job of getting back than maybe we will of getting that money. However, I did send out another message today asking for money, so I don't stop asking, I keep asking. This one was with the governor's office today, but just keep hitting them on it. We did have a email from the Corps this week, I think. Joe Kaufman's in the back there, I think, but trying to get moving on a project there. And Joe, I don't know if you've heard or not, but it deals with the real estate division, and we're trying to get something done. And they told us 2 or 3 months ago, well, we're close. And Joe sent them an email and said, okay, how close? And they said, well, we need more time. And Senator Crapo's office told me last week that the real estate division is getting moved to Seattle. Have you heard that?
I have not heard that, no.
Yeah, so that doesn't bode well for us. And I don't know if the people are gonna move, if Allison's gonna move, if they're literally gonna move the chairs and desks. I don't know what they're gonna do, but Letitia from Senator Crapo's office told me, it was her or Casey Ralston, I was talking to both of them, said that the real estate division is getting moved to Seattle. So that's not good news for small communities like us when we're trying to get our projects done. And the federal government does that to us because it puts us on the hook. We lose time, we lose money, and we're not the only ones in this boat, but it's a tough deal. And so I think we're doing all that we can to try to get money, and now they up and move on us. I guess we were too hard on them, Joe, but, so. I'm gonna claim that we're officially on Roman numeral 5, budget discussion, so we can check that one off, counselors. This is where you're supposed to ask questions or have discussions and provide direction to staff related to the 26 budget. If you have anything else to share with them, I know Director Gordon provided you with the budget requests for this year. You can go through those and check them out.
There's a lot.
There's a lot, and as it says on the front page here, these are budget requests, and they may or may not show up in the budget that you received from the finance office and myself, but this gives you an opportunity to look at those up front and know what they are, the requests. So.
If we have questions about the requests, who should we contact, the department directly or you?
Why don't you contact me first, and if I can't answer it, then we'll find someone in the department to help us answer that, but I should have a pretty good feel for most of these. Anything else? Okay, I think we're done, Director. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council will move on to Roman numeral 6, unfinished and new business. Item A, City Councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the City Council. An item that may come before the City Council in the foreseeable future shall be limited to comments, not discussion. Do we have any comments here? Or are we going to save them for tonight?
I just have a comment real quick,
Counselor?
because we got a lot of Public Works people here. The Public Works Day was successful. My 3-year-old came home and told me about how the water, they take the poop out of the water and send it to the fish. So, you got through to a 3-year-old.
Yeah, it was, Mayor, I would just echo that. It was really successful, and I think you had highest turnout. And a lot of schools partaking, so that's amazing. And it was exciting to be a part of it yet again. I think my kid's getting tired of going because he's been enough, so he's getting distracted easily, but I have heard the kindergarteners are, because I was asking some of your guys who their favorite group age was, and most of them say the kindergarteners because they seem kind of on the, where they're still interested and they can keep them engaged, and as they get older, they kind of get less engaged, so that's good. Hobby Lobby is open, so please go shopping if you want it to stay. You have to shop local if you want to keep stores like that, so I went in there, could go broke, so I don't want to be in there too long. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of hobbies, so. But yeah, share it to your friends, Hobby Lobby.
Okay, I'll move on to mayor comments. I'm going to save them until tonight. That brings us to Roman numeral 7, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Council President Kleber to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.